Welcome. This is Dr. Gary Sullivan, Chief of R&D and creator of IOP Technology. This research focuses on measuring thought diversity among professional staffs. When we talk about diversity, we are typically referring to things that we can see or otherwise discern from appearance or behavior. Things like age, race, education, and the like. Thought diversity is independent of these sources. For example, you can view a study on our website which shows that male and female executives approach decisions in exactly the same way. Gender does not affect thought diversity. The same holds true of the other diversity sources. While not apparent to the casual observer, thought diversity is very important. It determines what we think, and how we act. It is invisible, but like gravity or radio waves, invisible things can be measured, and that is the case with thought diversity. IOP technology can measure thought diversity using the basic information processing model as a diagnostic tool. IOP has a validated method of translating this basic information processing model into a form that we can see and measure. The first 5 minutes of the team tension video offers a good explanation of how this is done. Look for this image on our website if you are interested. IOP posts these measurements onto the 4 dimensions of the standard IOP graphic. We use this graphic to highlight the interrelationships between styles. For our purposes here, however, we can translate this into a more traditional chart. Each axis represents a style, a particular thought pattern, a different way of assessing an issue, and each style comes in different strengths. This creates a particular mix that makes every person and every group unique. And we can connect the tops of each of these columns to create an IOP profile, a simple line chart. Now we have something that makes comparisons a bit more understandable. And we are going to create those comparisons using hard data from 11,267 professionals in 1,015 different organizations, with significant representations from 35 countries and 13 different staff functions. This is a reasonably representative sample. We can probably trust the results. Earlier studies have shown that there is an embedded commonality in the management function. This commonality exists regardless of what is being managed. That commonality could dilute the actual diversity present in the function itself. So we drew our sample from non-management personnel in 13 well-recognized professions, each element of which was large enough to give a high level of statistical confidence. We then calculated a profile for each of these 13 staff groups, and averaged the results to give us an overall profile for staffs in general. We then posted all of the staff profiles onto a line chart, and posted the profile for the overall average of all of the staffs. Now, a maximum diversity thought profile would be a straight line. Here, every unique thought strategy is equally likely to be used. There is no commonality in perspective. You can't get more thought diverse than that. Our real-world thought diversity is far from being theoretically pure. Many staff members share a high common perspective in the analytical HA style and share a low common commitment to the instant action RS style. These shared perspectives have value. They make communication and coordination a lot easier. However, our straight line can act as a standard even if it is never realized in actual practice. The more a staff profile approaches that straight line, the greater is the level of thought diversity. For example, this profile shows a marked commonality of approach, the opposite of diversity. The people strongly favor the LP style and are adverse to the RS. It is much further away from our straight line diversity standard than is the average of all staffs. Now, visual comparisons are nice for illustration purposes. We know the flatter the profile, the more diverse is the group. But to actually compare groups, we need a way to actually measure flatness. Fortunately, statistics has a ready-made tool for handling this kind of thing. It is called the mean absolute deviation. The smaller the deviation, the less is the difference between the four thought patterns. The less the difference, the flatter the line. The flatter the line, the more diversity. And here are the results of the mean absolute deviation arranged in order of increasing thought diversity. Medical staffs have the highest commonality, and sales and marketing have the most diversity. Unfortunately, index numbers are not terribly intuitive, but there is a way out. People do not judge thought diversity against an absolute standard. They measure groups in relation to their experience with other groups. So we can calculate an average, and then calculate a percent difference of each group against that average. For example, medical staffs have 85% more commonality, that is to say less diversity, than does the average staff group. Scientists, on the other hand, have 26% more diversity, less commonality, than that average. And here are the results of all the staffs that we sampled. Those in black have more commonality than average, and those in red have more thought diversity than average. Now this list is better than the raw index numbers, but it still leaves something to be desired in terms of intuitive understanding. Plotting the data on a line chart gives a more intuitive picture. It measures everything as a percent difference from average. Medical staffs, mostly nurses, need a common approach. The same patient is being tended to by different nurses at different times, and they all have to follow orders on what and when things are to be done. High commonality and low thought diversity is what is needed for a hospital to run effectively. More diversity could easily translate into a higher mortality rate. But a high level of thought diversity has a lot of value in sales and marketing. The sales element must deploy different strategies for different customers. The marketing piece must adapt to various media, each with different demands and opportunities. What seems to be driving thought diversity differences is the nature of the job. Jobs with well-defined content seem to favor commonality, while those whose job content is more flexible and less defined appear to favor thought diversity. And notice the gap. Anyone comparing medical staffs to sales and marketing would see a big difference. Thought diversity estimates depend heavily on exactly who is being compared to whom. That same logic holds true in the spread between engineers and scientists. Engineering is confined by the characteristics of their raw materials, be that steel structures or electronic circuits, and the fact that the resulting product actually has to work upon completion. The scientist is not as confined as the engineer. Things don't have to work every time. Most experiments fail without major consequence. And the scientist has fewer preset solutions. They need more freedom to explore. For them, thought diversity has more value. But the content of both the engineer and scientist role have substantial undefined elements. Thus, the diversity gap between the functions is relatively small. The level of thought diversity of staffs seems to be governed by the job being done. The less well-defined the job content, the greater the value of thought diversity. The more well-defined, the greater the value of commonality. The anomaly appears to be human resources. Confined by law, policy, procedures, and established processes, the content seems to be well-defined. Yet, here it is shown as among the most thought-diverse of organizations. What's going on? The answer can be found in the makeup of HR. If we decompose it into its parts, we find that traditional HR, the things that keep the company running, functions like the HR generalists, recruiting, comp and benefits, and the like, land about in the middle of the distribution as would be expected. But the part that is dedicated to organizational development, things like training, executive education, coaching, and the like, score at the top of the thought diversity ranking, even higher than sales and marketing. This is what is pulling the overall HR number toward higher levels of thought diversity. The HR anomaly is due to discrepant responsibilities. On one hand, HR has to follow the mandates embedded in labor law, corporate policy, and standard procedures. On the other hand, It has to deliver knowledge in venues ranging from training sessions to sensitive consulting gigs, on subjects ranging from corporate orientation to organizational design. The job content of the learning and development segment of HR has high variability built in. So the basic premise seems to hold. The right level of diversity depends on the nature of the job being done. The less well-defined the job, the more valuable is thought diversity. Let's wrap this study up with some practical thoughts. First, thought diversity is an organizational tool. It trades off equally desirable qualities. Thought diversity increases the cost of coordination. Different positions take time to work out. The resultant uncertainty can cause efficiency to suffer and consistency to waver. These and other costs are real. Diversity is not free. Management requirements can also change. Diverse positions have to be reconciled, but that's not all of it. Different thought patterns create different expectations. These expectations can affect how a group is managed. For example, the idea of what is fair compensation can change. Standards of what constitutes adequate performance can shift. These and other things can change how a manager manages, and these changes can ramify through their other relationships. Again, diversity is not free. Offsetting these costs are opportunities. Competitive product advantages can be gained. Improvements in process and procedures can lower costs. And a forward momentum can keep an organization aligned with its changing environment. The advantages of thought diversity are real, but they are also not assured. Costs of unknown magnitude combined with potential gains of uncertain probability argue for active management of thought diversity. The trick, of course, is to figure out just how much, if any, is the right level of adjustment. The process begins by figuring out your current position. This only requires an IOP score for each person and a simple calculation. The next step is to figure out if a change is warranted. Comparing the existing profile to other similar organizational units is one place to start. These can be internal or external units, depending on the need being addressed. Substantial deviations would flag opportunities or exposures. The profile can then be tweaked by introducing or substituting people. One new person, a few, or lots. You can watch the profile change before actually having to move people around. If the diversity concern is focused on a small unit, like a team, section, or department, IOP already has tools that incorporate diversity. IOP reports like team analysis automatically include textual diagnostics and recommendations, particular to that group and its mission. A good part of the analysis is already done for you. Thought diversity can even be affected by shuffling leadership in a smaller group. This kind of change can affect how the diversity already embedded in a group is expressed. A standard IOP leader analysis can provide this kind of assessment in both textual and numerical terms. Again, you get foreknowledge of probable outcomes. This gives you a distinct advantage. You don't have to guess. You will know the likely effects before you actually implement any change. And you can bundle this knowledge into fact-based reports and presentations, suitable for review by any level of management. Getting your ideas and analysis across to others becomes a lot easier. Let's spend the last minute or so summarizing what we have found. Thought diversity exists in every group. It is always present and influences every decision. It is the most widespread and arguably the most important form of diversity. It always involves a trade-off. It is a management issue, and it can create managerial challenges that have to be considered. But everything can be measured and the trade-offs can be balanced. Comparison groups, internal and external, are available, all of which means that objective assessments can be constructed. Dispassionate judgments can be made and can be logically defended in a rational and dispassionate format. The tools and methods outlined in this study should be considered for inclusion in every HR professional's toolkit. Thank you for viewing this video. If you would like to learn more about IOP technology, please visit our websites at iop.com or oeinstitute.org. Both sites have much more information on IOP and the areas where it has or can be applied. Thank you again for your interest in IOP technology.